Namaskar and welcome to In Focus. He's the grand old man of Indian politics, a cabinet minister in Jawaharlal Nehru's government, a cabinet minister in Morarji Desai's government, and several times chief minister of Orissa. Today he's with us to share his perception of the United Front government, its leadership and its policies. Mr. Patnaik, I want to talk to you as the elder statesman, not just of your party, the Janata Dal, but Indian politics as a whole. Today, there's a lot of concern about the performance of this government. How do you assess the present government?
You see, when you talk of a united front government, it is really trying to unite 13 pieces of lobsters, live lobsters that is, very active lobsters in one pot. And one man is trying to hold that in balance. And that is Devegowda's fortune or misfortune, as you call it.
I don't want to interrupt, but let me put something to you. You call them 13 lobsters. Many people say these lobsters are quarreling all the time.
That's what I'm saying. That is the whole idea. Lobsters quarrel amongst themselves, and they also do trying to little jumping off here and there. And they has got one man trying to hold it together, and it is not a very nice job for him. It is, somebody calls him, because he's the Prime Minister, it is a fortune for him. I personally think it would be unfortunate to call him a Prime Minister, a fortunate Prime Minister, but it also be called unlikely to term him as anything but a man who is holding the balance together. Even though these lobsters from one group to another, in their what they call the steering committee, fight amongst themselves, fight against the policies already established by themselves, and this creates difficulties.
So it sounds as if it's an unstable government, a quarreling government.
No.
Quarreling?
Quarreling amongst the partners. It is like a coalition. A coalition has come to stay in this country. It's my perception. It will never go back to a single party rule.
But you know, Mr. Patnaik, there are coalitions and there are coalitions. Let me put something to you that worries people. Many people say it's not just that the CPI, the CPM, the Tamil Manila Congress, the Samajwadi Party have differences of opinion. They make those differences public.
I know.
And as a result, no one seems to know what the government stands for.
Yes, you are right there. It is unfortunate that they make it public. They make it public only because they got to go to their own clientele, their voters. Only for that. But the government may run smoothly, but all this creates a lot of concern amongst the average people.
It also suggests that they're putting their constituency or their party before the government, doesn't it?
That is so, because that is the character of this government. That is the character of this coalition.
So then it's not very united, even though it's called a united front government.
Well, it is united to form a government.
That's all.
That's all.
And as you said, the Prime Minister is only the keeper of the balance.
Yes, mainly.
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 I want to talk about the Prime Minister later, but let me bring something else up. You know, it's not just that they quarrel, it's not just that they make their differences so obvious, so apparent, but parties like the CPI and CPM have held nationwide protests and agitations against policies that their own government is implementing and which are part of the common minimum program. Now, how do you react to that?
This is the character of the lobster.
Go on, tell me a bit more, explain that to me.
That's the character of the lobster.
You mean, is the lobster so immature as to try and threaten its own government?
He doesn't think of the government, he thinks of his own clientele.
So they are selfish?
And think, well, how do you view it? For example, 13 pieces have been assembled together to form a united front government. They come from different areas, different persuasions, and the one thing that held them together was this
desire to keep out the BJP?
No, to have this secular government as against anti-secular BJP. This is what is holding them together. This is also the misfortune or the fortune or bad luck of the BJP. Although they have an excellent leadership, but their policies are just as profane, if I may use the word, as the other groups in the United Front.
But come back to the United Front. Are you saying that these people who are quarreling lobsters are therefore showing immaturity?
That is an administration that the first time they come into national administration.
So they are behaving immaturely?
So somewhat immaturely, slowly it is improving, and it has got to go a long way.
So it's not improving fast enough?
Should, in my opinion, is not improving fast enough.
Let me raise something else with you. Mr. A.B. Bardhan, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of India, is on record saying that he wants parts of the common minimum program changed. He's talking about the commitment to disinvestment. He's talking about the opening up of the insurance sector. Now, when he says that, doesn't he threaten the bedrock of the government?
No, it doesn't really, you know. He is the General Secretary of the CPM. That's his view.
You mean he's only posturing?
He's posturing a thing.
So that's worse than what you're saying is don't take him seriously.
Well, you cannot take him seriously in terms of government. That is why Jyoti Basu at one point of time, that was a Himalayan blunder for CPM have not joined the government, because they can use this kind of language.
Let's come to that. Do you agree that it was a Himalayan blunder for the CPM not to have joined?
Look, we tried. There's a point of time when we wanted Jyoti Basu to be the Prime Minister. And his party, somehow or other, didn't accept that position.
But do you think it was a Himalayan blunder not to have accepted?
But he was going to be the Prime Minister. I was saying no question of joining the government. He was slated for the Prime Ministership.
Do you wish he had accepted it?
No, everybody tried it. But then he finally turned back and named Mr. Devegowda.
Okay, I'll come to Mr. Devegowda later. I want to leave that for a little at the moment. Let's come back to coalition governments. We've had a couple of polls recently of 13,000 people. And it clearly shows that if an election were to be held tomorrow, the United Front will lose seats, the Congress will lose seats, but the BJP and its allies will get perhaps as much as 240, which is virtually coming to power. How do you react to that?
I don't accept that position. BJP are in doldrums themselves, very much.
They've
look at Maharashtra, look at Rajasthan, look at Gujarat.
They've survived in Rajasthan quite comfortably. They've won Punjab handsomely. They've won the Lok Sabha by-elections quite admirably.
Where?
Nagaur, Chhindwara.
Where in Rajasthan?
Nagaur, Rajasthan, Chhindwara, Madhya Pradesh.
Well,
and this poll of 13,000 people says they're going to get 240 seats with their allies.
Well, I don't think so.
No?
No.
So even though these lobsters are quarreling, even though they're not
They
performing,
will hold firm.
Why? What keeps them there?
The government, the power. Power always holds people together. There is coalitions all over the world. How are they holding together?
Are you saying that just the lure of power, just the apparatus and comforts of power will
Not
keep them together?
comforts of power, the power itself. It may be a corrupting influence, but by itself is something which holds the clientele of that group together. So that group having combined to form a united government, maybe at later stage even CPM joining that, the power equation does not change.
In a sense, what you're saying, Mr. Patnaik, is that it's self-interest that keeps them together.
Of course it does. What is politics? Politics is nothing but self-interest to start with and national interest number two.
But self-interest first.
To survive, you must survive to be able to say something, do something.
But tell me something else. You're also suggesting that there's no vision and ideology that keeps them together.
There's different sectors of ideology.
Sometimes conflicting.
Sometimes mostly conflicting. Now if you say Bengal government, they've allowed and entertained the multinationals into the state. So what is this burden talking about that it should not happen and that should not happen? It should not open up here or there. Makes no sense. Doesn't make sense to the government.
Let's pull together some of the comments you made about the government. You called them lobsters. You said they weren't...
No, this is a cluster of lobsters, I said.
Even worse. You called them a cluster of lobsters.
A cluster of lobsters fighting against each other and fighting against outsiders, both.
It sounds like a quarreling mess.
No, it sounds like very quarreling cohesion.
A quarreling coalition.
Cohesion.
Okay.
Quarreling coalition with a lot of cohesion.
Let me put to you some of the things you said about this government. You called them a cluster of lobsters quarreling amongst themselves and with the outside. You said their performance is not improving fast enough. You said that it's self-interest that keeps them together, the lure of power. You don't sound as if you're very happy with this government's performance.
So I was working with Nehru's government. I was closely together in very difficult times when the Chinese aggression took place and so on and so forth. I had all the authority of Nehru to function at that time, you see. Home Ministry, War Ministry, Finance Ministry, everything together. Then, from that sequence of events as it comes down now, we have landed us to this situation now, where 10 or 12, 15 groups have gathered together to form a government. It must take its own time to iron out its differences.
But it's a disillusioning process, isn't it?
No, I wouldn't say so.
But the scales have fallen from your eyes.
No, the scale, of course, cannot be the same as in Nehru's time, obviously not. Obviously not. Even in Morarji's time, the so-called BJP were my partners there, you see.
Let me put something to you. If I asked you to give this government marks for its performance, out of 10, how many will you give?
I would say this government would perform much better if the Congress party and the supporting from outside were part of the government. I would like to make it very clear, you see.
You want the Congress part of the government?
I would like them to be able to give it the stability and the force for not only for 5 years, for the next 5 years also.
Would you like Mr. Devagowda to make a formal offer to Mr. Kesri along these lines?
Well, I don't know whether he has done it or not. I'm sure they must have talked amongst each other and so on and so forth. But I am saying this, that they should have talked to various people, but they should. I don't want them to break up. Well, the same thing happened in Chaudhry Charan Singh's time when I was in the government.
You also want the CPM to formally join the government
Yes,
too, don't you?
of course. We even invited them, told them.
When that happens, of course, this government will virtually consist of 2/3 of parliament, won't it?
When the Congress joins.
And when the CPM joins,
Yes,
then it will consist of 2/3 of parliament.
Yes, of course.
Okay, then it will be stable.
Then it will not only be stable, it will be able, whatever the policy they iron out amongst themselves should be kept in their own basket and come out with one single...
You may be asking for too much, come out with one single voice.
They can come out.
But come back to my question. What about today? The Congress is outside, the CPM is outside. Yeah. Today, how many marks do you give out of 10?
As it is.
Yes, as it is.
5 out of 10.
That's all, 50%, no more.
No more. It cannot be.
Cannot be more than 50%.
It cannot be at the situation as it is.
Mr. Patnaik, at that point, I'm afraid we have to take a commercial break, but I want to come back in part 2 and talk about the leadership of the government. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Don't go away. Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with the grand old man of Indian politics, Biju Patnaik. Mr. Patnaik, in part 1, we talked about your assessment of this government. I want to now ask you about your assessment of the Prime Minister. There's a lot of concern in all quarters, frequently voiced sotto voce by members of his own government about the Prime Minister's leadership style. You're an experienced person. You've seen Prime Ministers. You've been in high office yourself. How do you assess Devagowda's performance?
Well, the Prime Minister's primary job is to hold the position of the government, his government. Now I would say, what is leadership? In action. Take the case of Kashmir. We encouraged it, sponsored it, and saw that Farooq Abdullah comes to power. This is good leadership. Again, when Farooq Abdullah says that we must settle this vexatious question of our last 50 years on the dividing line of actual control, Pakistan their side and India their side. I would say he is talking sense.
Farooq Abdullah is?
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the Prime Minister. On
Well,
Kashmir
yeah.
and Pakistan, the Prime Minister, according to the papers, contradicts himself every day. Mr. Gujral is always correcting what the PM said the day before.
No, that's not correct. That is not correct. Prime Minister also voices this thing. Like, keep the Pakistan side as interim, at the same time not oppose or say anything hostile to what Abdullah said.
Farooq Abdullah has just said that to solve the Kashmir problem, India should accept the line of control as the official international border. Do you agree with that?
I not only agree, this was the proposal given to Panditji in 1962 by me. It's part of Foreign Office record.
You would like this government to take that step?
The simple thing is that you cannot just wish things away. Pakistan is not going to leave what they have got, and we are not going to leave what we have got, so why not?
But
get
tell
down
me
to the
something,
business?
would you like this government, given all its problems, to take that step?
Why not? But that will solve many problems of Indian problems, defense problems.
You've just traveled with Mr. Devagowda on a plane in Orissa. Did you discuss this with him?
Yes, this matter was cropped up.
What did he say?
Nothing. I only said that 6 crores a day better diverted somewhere else. To do that, you got to, what Abdullah says, that's the only acceptable thing. And I said that in 1962 to Panditji, he had accepted it.
So you asked the Prime Minister to seriously consider Farooq Abdullah's suggestion that accept the line of control
Yes,
as
of
a
course
border.
I did.
What did the PM say?
Nothing. He just kept quiet. Naturally, he has to keep quiet.
But did he object?
He's got to go to his steering committee, his bunch of lobsters.
But you understand people's signals. Was he receptive to your idea?
Well, he was not against it by any means. He has not said one word against what Abdullah said, or I said, or he said, or he's not said anything.
So he could accept it.
It is acceptable. But even if he accepts it, the question is the whole bunch should also get down to it.
Earlier on, you described the Prime Minister as simply a keeper of the balance. You said that was really what he was, not a Prime Minister. Opinion polls have recently found that 3 times as many people think Atal Bihari Vajpayee was a better Prime Minister than Devagowda. Does that worry you?
They thought the same before.
But
It is not a better Prime Minister or a lesser Prime Minister. It's the events that create a Prime Minister. If Atal Bihari Vajpayee was in the same situation as Devagowda, I don't know which way he will be running.
well, let me push this further. The same polls have suggested that 63% of the country think the United Front government needs to change its Prime Minister.
Change his Prime Minister. But don't say change it to Atal Bihari.
No, they're not saying change it to Atal Bihari. They're simply saying that the United Front government, to establish its credibility, to establish its reputation, needs to change the Prime Minister.
Look, I don't want to go back 5 years. The reputation of this country was in a total shambles by the previous government. Total shambles. To recover from that, and all the players of that previous government also working in hostility to this government's policies and programs, it's been quite a job.
You said in part 1 you wanted the Congress party to join this government.
To
You
make
said
it-
you wanted the CPM to join this government.
CPM would have joined it anyhow. We wanted this fellow Jyoti Basu to be the Prime Minister.
Do you
So-
still want Jyoti Basu to become Prime Minister?
We always said that, but he has refused that thing point blank.
But do you think you should be making...
He would have been a more colorful Prime Minister, if I may say so.
a more effective?
Effective under these circumstances, I doubt.
Would he have been overall a more reassuring Prime Minister for the country?
This kind of, as I call them, lobsters. This kind of lobster situation will not make him any better. He will be fighting with his own party on one side and the others on the other side. But the same problem.
Let me come back to my
This is
question.
the same problem every democratic coalitions in the world. Nothing new about it.
So when people say a change of Prime Minister will help the United Front government perform better, do you agree or disagree?
No, I have nothing. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Under the circumstances, it makes no sense whatsoever.
So when the Congress rejoin as you would like them to, and if the CPM join as you would like them to, you still see Mr. Devagowda continuing as Prime Minister?
He could be. Or jointly together they could select a leader, a Prime Minister, not a leader. There can be no leader. There can be no leader under these circumstances who can sway the nation. Only the events can sway the nation. Like Kashmir. The whole nation's phobia is beaten against Pakistan and India.
Two things follow very quickly. Number one, the question of changing prime ministers is not something you've ruled out.
No, not
right?
ruled out, but I don't think it's going to have a great deal of more effect. I don't think so.
More importantly is the second corollary. Today we have prime ministers who cannot be leaders. Isn't that right?
Cannot?
Who cannot be leaders. Events won't let them lead.
Of course.
They're just prime minister.
That is understood. Vajpayee is very good at making speeches. But in action I've seen him. He was in the cabinet with me. I've seen he was also tottering away when the critical time comes.
They say of Devagowda that he's very good at making promises. The country doesn't think he's that good at living up to them.
Promises? Doesn't make any promises, particular promises.
Makes them all the time.
Well, that's what people say, that he's making too many promises. I suppose he said, I'll give so much to this fellow, so much to that fellow, so much to this state, so much to that state. That is only part of the planning commission's...
And what about our Home Minister, Mr. Patnaik? People think he puts his foot in his mouth very often.
Not very often. He did it once or twice. And he was pulled up by his own party. And then he also said that to me when I asked him in the parliament, he said, why do you say all these things? He was talking as an important leader of the opposition, not as the Home Minister. So he said, I'll give me a little time to adjust in the method of government. I've never done a government. I've never been in a government.
Has he made the adjustment or is he still
No,
learning?
He has done it. It's more than enough.
My last question, Mr. Patnaik. You've said we're living through an age of quarreling, lobsters. You've said that today prime ministers are prime ministers, not leaders. Are you optimistic about the next 4 or 5 years ahead of us?
A coalition government, if it goes on like this, cannot be much better. But as I said, if the Congress and the CPM get on to the government and really get down to the business of running governments, it could be better. All these people, excepting CPM, CPI, were in our government under Morarji. This Vajpayee, all these fellows were there. The Sardars were there. Everybody was there.
So in other words, it all depends on whether Congress and CPM join the government.
To make it, give it stability, yes, not quality.
Mr. Patnaik, for sharing what I'm sure people will describe as your cynical views so openly with us, thank you very much indeed. That's it today. We'll be back next week with another interviewee. But for tonight, goodbye.